Welcome, Anirudh. We have with us today the king of stings. You started the sting operations with Tehelka in Operation West End. And since then, you've been doing stings one after the other. Of course, that was the biggest and had the largest impact. And also, it was a new method at that time, the first time somebody ever did anything. Since then, you've done dozens of stings afterwards. And I apologize for the noise, but this is India. You have to get used to it. Okay? We can't do anything about it. Tell me, you decided to kind of revisit history. Why did you decide to do this story? Why did you go back to it?
You see, it was a very significant story in terms of the scale and the fact that for the last 2 decades, every communal incident you can trace back to this one movement, Ram Janmabhoomi movement and the incident that happened on 6th December 1992. Whether you look at the Mumbai serial blast, or you look at even the Godhra incident was returning car sevaks. So everything actually stems back to Ram Janmabhoomi movement in the recent 2 decades. And unless the genesis of what happened that day and the people who were responsible for that incident are sort of held accountable, we will keep going on into this cycle of action and reaction. So in terms of significance, that was, nobody can question the significance. And the fact that in spite of 2 decades going on, nobody's really been nailed on it.
Well, after we did this story, which you based a lot of your investigation on, incidentally, after we did the coverage of the Ayodhya and the bringing down of the structure, after that, in January, another story was done, incidentally, by Vikram Chandra, who's now with NDTV, in which he did interviews with people whose faces were disguised, but from the Shiv Sena and the Bajrang Dal and VHP, who claimed credit for everything. And in fact, based on those tapes, those people went to jail. And one of them, in fact, called me up and said, after he came out of jail, saying कि आपकी वजह से हमको 1 साल वहाँ जेल में रहना पड़ा, पर फिर भी मैं आपको धन्यवाद देता हूँ क्योंकि मैं बीजेपी में तो हीरो बन गया. So it's not as if people were not accountable. They were. The CBI used our tapes, in fact, to zero in on them. In fact, while the investigation was going on, I was asked to supply the 36 original tapes from the story. And I refused. I said, either you send me a warrant, but I'm not going to give you the original tapes. And they didn't follow it up. We kept the tapes. We did not give it to them. And so your story, first of all, is very dramatic. Where were the horses? You have an introduction where the horses can't say
horses was the editor's own imagination about Babur coming in.
That's crazy, you know. I mean, horses is, I thought कि कहाँ
I think in the 15th, 16th century you had horses. So that's a montage, you know. You have hardly any hold about what creative editors are going.
जोधा अकबर से निकाल के clip लगा के घोड़े लगा दिए in this. It's a bit fantasy.
Nothing fantasy. It was just that collage bit, the opening sting that they call it. But otherwise, it was just based on what these people said. And our own research.
What did Ashish, your associate editor, what did he tell these people when he was interviewing them?
He told these people actually something which is not really, it is right. He used his real name. He said that he was doing a book on Ayodhya and they just vomited everything out. So, which is to say that they were in the space where India had moved on. And they felt that they had been used invariably they felt that the BJP had used them in this movement, used them and thrown away. And they felt they were coming from that psychological space that nothing really has happened about the temple. And we feel very, very bad about it. So that was also a space from which they came. And that's why they talk so much.
But there were 2 people in your investigation. There were 2 people, Ramesh Pratap Singh, who's also in the news track tapes, who expresses fear in giving details. He says, I don't know what will happen to me, implying that he could get bumped off, and he continues to talk, which means that his life is in danger if he tells you more details, which he did. And also Pawan Pandey warns that you could ruin his career. So in the sense of your junoon to get the story, you're also damaging the people that you're using.
Not really. I mean, if you are guilty of a crime, then you can't really that is a defense for innocence. It's not really a defense for people who might sort of try to escape the legal consequences of their actions. And some of those people were trying to sell us artifacts, as you know, the Mir Baqi thing that they found, and they were trying to make a killing out of it.
In fact, I have a piece of the Babri Masjid
brought
back by one of the reporters. But the thing is that one gets the feeling that these people are talking, but the journalist, which is you as the owner of Cobra Post and Ashish, who is conducting the stings, for you, you seem to forget the human element that your story could be destructive to these people. Don't you think a journalist should keep that in mind?
Actually, if we had used a lot of what they had said, we had edited out a lot of what they have said. I mean, these tapes would run into 12, 15 hours, even from our end. So what you saw was just about 2.5.
But don't you think this is really entrapment and not journalism then?
That is a ridiculous statement that you're making. The definition of entrapment, even the way it has developed in British and American case law, is the fact that even for a while you take the Sunday Times story in London, where money was used, again the same story of MPs taking money to ask questions or write letters, etc., is that the inducement should be in proportion to what they are expecting in a situation like this. So for instance, if you remember the Moda group of papers, they did a story many years back about, they flew in the English football coach all the way to Dubai, saying that he was coming in for, one of the sheikhs wanted to employ him for a Gulf team, and they set him up in a big 5-star hotel, and they talked big money, that being a coach. And then while they were doing that, they asked his real, Goran Eriksson, actually the Swedish coach, they asked his real opinion about the English players. So their objective was to get at what he really felt about the English players, and this was just a strategy for him to get speaking. Now in that particular situation, a football coach in today's world, you talk about millions of dollars. So when they talked about millions of dollars, it's a perfectly acceptable norm. To give a counter example, we did a story many years back about how MPs in Delhi were renting out their flats. And they were taking money like 25,000 rupees a month, or 30,000 rupees a month. Now, and we did that story about how they were renting out their flats. Now, if in that situation, we had gone and offered them, say, 2 lakhs a month, that is entrapment, where money is used. But here, in any case, I'm talking just in the sense of the theory of it, and we have to have prior information. And prior information there is existing in the form of Lieberman Commission and even the CBI prosecution, and even our own sources. No money was obviously used. It's not a money-based story, and we do.
पर थोड़ा चुपता नहीं है कि बेचारा कहानी सारी बोल रहा है. As it is, he's down and out. He's been used. Now he's been thrown aside. Now he's pouring his heart out.
I mean, what do you mean? There are hundreds and dozens of people who have died because of that movement. What are you talking? You look at what Sakshi Maharaj is saying. That Ashok Singhal came up to him and they made a call that we have to again run up these car sevaks after the 1990, I'm talking about the 1990 incident, because unless some people die, ये movement बलिदान हम लोग उग्र नहीं होगा movement
So Ashok Singhal said that. 2 people have said that to you on the tape. That Ashok Singhal ने कहा कि जब तक कोई मरेंगे नहीं तो ये आंदोलन उठेगा नहीं.
So I'm just giving that as an instance.
No, so I'm
that these people are not really
deserve
the sort of the sentiment that you are expressing.
Okay.
Even in the sense of I mean, look at the consequences to India in terms of Mumbai serial blast, in terms of even the Godhra incident, for God's sake. I mean, the whole programs have been done on because of this Ayodhya movement.
But did you think of going to Ashok Singhal to verify that he
tried,
actually said that?
He wouldn't speak to us.
And all the others who were mentioned on the Ashok Giriraj and Giriraj Kishore.
We went to them 2-3 times, each one of them. So
the movement
was so. The others, I think, a lot of them were sick, unapproachable. Some of them are in Nepal. So what we could get, we got.
Now, how do you verify their statements? Because there are some contradictory statements also. And I know since I covered the story at that time, in fact, I think you've got the advantage that a lot of the young people today, since it's 22 years old, a lot of the young people today either were too young to even know the story or were not even born. So you have an advantage that you're doing a story almost for the first time for a lot of these people. But for example, one of the people you interviewed said that Uma Bharti was in Janki Mahal and she was kept separately. As a matter of fact, she wasn't. She was there, sent by Advani, ostensibly to stop the destruction. And she went there and she did not stop the destruction. She joined in the milieu of knocking it down. And
in fact, the slogan that she was using was "Ek dhakka aur do."
Or exactly. So one of them said that she wasn't there. But I know for a fact that she was, because I got reports that our correspondent who went to cover it was, at that time, he has changed since, at that time was a Hindutva hardcore Hindutva follower, and he was seen as hugging Uma Bharti when it came down. All right, and I was questioned that you have a reporter, how can he give a balanced report if he's out there hugging so-and-so? And in fact, ironically, he did give a balanced report. I was very surprised because normally there were big arguments on giving the balance, but this report which we got from him was balanced. So there is factual inaccuracies.
No,
that
what
is
you are
my
calling
point.
factual inaccuracy, I beg to differ. I took their versions as it is. Now, if I had gone with a particularly editorial outlook, like for instance, there were conflicting versions on L.K. Advani.
Yes.
Two people said that L.K. Advani was there in these secret meetings and that he was responsible for all this. Vedanti himself says that he also administered the sankalp to him and other BJP leaders to break the mosque, to bring the mosque down. Now, there is this one, there are these few people with this who are talking about
But
this.
the majority have
and
said that he started crying and said, Roko.
Majority, some, and the others have taken his side that he didn't know anything about it. Now, if he had a particular sort of editorial mindset, we would be editing out those portions. We didn't do it. We said, let in any big sort of complex movement, in a complex story like this, there would be contradictions. It is better to go with the contradictions rather than sort of take a particular line. So in that sense, it was an editorial call to go with what they said, rather than sort of make a story on a particular line. Otherwise, it would have been very easy on the editing table to do all that and take a particular line.
To slant it. But the thing is that it can get confusing for the average viewer or reader, because if it's repeatedly said that there were three people, Murli Manohar Joshi, Advani, and Rajmata Scindia, Vijay Raja Scindia, who were saying at the last minute to get the people down and not to actually knock it down.
And actually, I feel also there's an element, at least I felt the same, I could be wrong, but that there was a public posture where there were a lot of people and there was this was largely a public posture.
One person said that.
And the other,
that was his public position.
There was a rather, yes, there's one or two people said that and I buy that. And there was this other hidden thing which there was some people told that there was a lot of glee also at the fact that it had happened. So it's once you go back, why would, I mean, like one of them said, you're going around all over the place, exciting people to come here and do all this. And then you're taking, some of them are saying you're taking hidden votes to do all that. And then when there's a public poster and a public sort of Ramkatha Manch, you're addressing people, then you want to say saddest day and all that. So you take that all with a pinch of salt. Because some people are very, very sharp here. One of them talks about Vinay Katiyar, that the moment it went to 10 o'clock, he disappeared.
He ran away.
He ran away. Because he was conscious. No, that was 1990. I'm talking about 92, the demolition. And he's conscious of the legal consequences of being there at that spot. And then he came back at 5 o'clock. So there were a lot of these smart people who understood what was happening and what would be the consequences if they are caught there and witnesses say they were there. So they are conscious of that fact.
So BJP has called it, as can be expected, that it's a Congress-sponsored sting operation. What do you have to say about that?
Look, it's a long time back I discovered that you have to have a thick skin in journalism. There'll be lots of people. If you notice that the day the story ran, not one BJP leader came and questioned the content of it. Not one statement on the content. I think even Mr. Naqvi in his press conference, they were going to EC, etc., and they were rubbishing it in their old way.
Yeah.
Nobody questioned the content. The people who appeared on the tape didn't question the content. They didn't say it was doctored or misrepresented. Nothing at all. And they go on this wild spree which you expect on every story. I mean, everybody who is hurt by a particular editorial or who thinks that they have been hurt or they would be hurt in the eyes of the people, take this slant because it's easy, as you said, to go after the messenger. And you have to take it with a pinch of salt. I mean, any good story that you do would face that problem. If you don't face that problem, there's something wrong with that story. Because good stories essentially means that investigative story means there are certain blocks of people or companies who are getting hurt by that story. Whether it is a corruption story, whether it is any kind of corruption, it hurts certain people. So that is obviously the kind of larger thing. And forget that for a moment. Actually, at one point, I was even sort of prepared to say, okay, they are calling me all kinds of names. You can call me whatever you want. I mean, that even presuming what you all are saying is correct. I mean, let me give that to you for a minute, that whatever you're saying, I am all that. But does it wash away what you all have said? First, answer the content and then get on to what I am. I could be anybody. This is the same question that came up in Operation West End. George Fernandez said we were an ISI agent, we were a Hinduja agent. But did it take away from what we found? It didn't take away from what we found. And the other thing which happens in this whole complex thing of events is that it's in mass media, media has reduced objectivity to giving equal space to the other person. They are not taking editorial call or justifying giving that other person space. That other person in that space can say whatever he or she wants, which is ridiculous. You can't reduce the principle of objectivity to equal time and do whatever you want in that time. You have to take a call yourself. I mean, first you have to corner them and ask them, what is all this? It shows पूर्व आयोजित आपकी योजना थी मंदिर उसको गिराने की. अब आपके लोग ये बोल रहे हैं. And when if everybody is saying that, then please answer this first. We will get on to the media is part 2, part 3. You know, why did it do this now? Why did this all nonsensical question? If you remember, in 1989, at the height of election fever, I think Chitra Subramaniam and Ram came out with the biggest explosive thing about Bofors. It's the same principle. The stories today, all the papers are chasing up candidates. Express did a whole feature on MP led schemes, which MP is doing what with his funds. And they're catching some MPs with their pants down. That this is fund, this is fund. Now you can ask them this question also. Why you're doing at the time of elections? You are supposed to do it. If you don't, it is a moral imperative to do it. I mean, at the time of elections, I mean, that is the call that you asked me earlier, is that media organizations have to take. If you have something on some people, and the story is ready, I mean, not a half-baked story, and you feel that the story is ready, do you take it now and educate your readers, or do you just wait for everything to settle down so that you don't get the opprobrium that you will get now, or the accusation that you will get now if you run with the story now? So I am not bothered about opprobrium. Let them call me what I want, but I want to run the story now.
So Anirudh, tell me, in your own view, in some words that you used in your voiceover, you've talked about it being the biggest crime of all. You've taken a position where you can say that Anirudh Bahl was against the destruction of that structure. That is so?
I am against the destruction of anything, any illegal act, which as a movement you are saying, it is you have violated all kinds of manner of Indian laws, and you can't hide behind that it's a movement and it gives us a right to get away with blue murder.
And in this, as we did in Newstrack also, we had mentioned that we had a Chief Minister, Kalyan Singh, who was speaking from both sides of his mouth, which said in our voiceover, which he was allowing it to happen, although pretending that he would stop it.
That's right.
And we also showed in Newstrack that there was a mutiny going on where some guy was going through, the senior constable, a senior officer was going through the motions of telling them to stop the car sevaks.
That's right.
And those guys refused to move because they had been
instructed,
briefed before that do not move. And then we showed the footage of them filing out of the
I
area.
saw that. That's right. That was very good work.
Without tear gas, without lathi charge, without a single bullet fired in the air.
That's right.
The whole police force
they just abdicated their duty.
They abdicated their duty completely.
That's right.
Now, when you were, obviously you looked at the Newstrack tapes, why did you, because you interviewed a lot of the people 22 years later that we showed, for example, Ram Pratap, who was doing the...
I didn't see that particular tape. We only saw the ones where, as you're saying, they were abdicating, and the ones of the 1990 where the car sevaks were killed.
Okay, and the Ramesh Pratap...
I didn't see that.
Ramesh Pratap is doing dress rehearsals. And
that's
then,
right. In fact...
And the saddest thing for me was to see the difference in the man, that when he was doing the dress rehearsals 22 years ago, this young, vibrant man with a whistle ordering how to wrap the rope around the stones and pull them down and everything, and now you see this defeated old man 22 years later who's gained absolutely nothing. And it was sad to see. But why...
In fact, none of them had any kind words to say about the BJP leadership. None of them.
And he also mentioned that if he says anything against people, he fears for his life, because the person who felt responsible for everything that went wrong, in fact, is now vice chancellor. No, in your tape.
That's right.
That he's now a vice chancellor in Dehradun.
That's right.
And he could just have him, you know.
Yeah, he took names.
Yeah.
He did take names.
And so I think the saddest part is that all this happened, and it gave...
They're talking about dynamite. They're talking about Plan B is dynamite.